Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie Munson, Operations Manager for our Data Center Testing Services at the UNH Interoperability Laboratory. I am joined today by Tim Sheehan, Technical Manager of our Data Center Test Services. Today we will be presenting on NVMe Plugfest 11. Before we get into our presentation, I want to invite everyone to feel free to submit any questions you may have to the Q&A, and we will address all questions at the end of the presentation. The UNH Interoperability Laboratory, also referred to as UNH-IOL or simply IOL, was founded over 30 years ago at the University of New Hampshire. We're a neutral third-party test lab working with a wide range of unique technologies such as NVMe. Our workforce consists of mostly college students. I think we have about 100 students right now, and we also employ 20 full-time staff members, such as Tim and myself, to help support the students with the testing and development efforts that we have here. The IOL has been working alongside the NVMe org for about 7 years now, managing the Integrators List, offering test services, test tools, and hosting Plugfest. This is exactly why we're here today, which is to discuss NVMe Plugfest number 11. Plugfest 11 is actually 2 events which will take place over the course of 2 weeks. The first will occur the week of June 17th. This is our fabrics event, so all fabrics products such as Rocky, TCP, and Fiber Channel. The following week, the week of June 24th through 27th, will be PCIe SSDs and hosts. Both events will be testing for Test Plan 11 with the purpose of qualifying for version 11 of the Integrators List. There are 3 additional test tracks that will be taking place during the first week at the Fabrics event, NVMe TCP large build, the DCB large build, and our Fiber Channel large build. All 3 of these are participation dependent, so if there is enough participation, this will be offered. First thing on the agenda today is our Integrators List. There are 3 Integrators lists. The first is our existing NVMe Integrators List with 178 products as of today. Next is the NVMe MI Integrators List with 8, and our Fabrics Integrators List with 50 products. So the NVMe Integrators List will accept PCIe drives, host platforms, and switches. The MI will accept MI drives, and then the products for the Fabrics list are listed right here: initiators, targets, and switches for Rocky, TCP, and Fiber Channel. The NVMe Integrators List requirements for SSDs require that all devices go through 2 rounds of conformance testing. The first with our PC Edition test tool, and the second with our Lecroy Edition test tool. And then there is also a series of Interop tests that occur over 6 platforms, but the device needs to pass with only 5. Once all those are met, then the product will qualify for the Integrators List. For switches, the switches will have to do interop testing with 5 NVMe SSDs. And then NVMe MI SSDs will have to run conformance testing with the Teledyne-Lecroy test tool. The NVMe over Fabrics Integrators List requirements are listed right here. Initiators or hosts will have to be tested against 2 different subsystems. The same idea as the previous, except for instead of passing with 5, there's only 2. For targets, there is Interop testing, again with 2 different Interop partners, and then conformance tests as well. Notice bullet 2 and 3 for the conformance test. There is NVMe protocol conformance tests, and then tests that are specific to fabrics testing. Both have to pass for the version 11.0. And now I am going to hand it over to Tim.
Great, thanks, Gary. So what I'd like to talk to everybody about today is Test Plan 11. This is Tim Sheehan from the Interoperability Lab. I'm a development manager here. And we'd like to go over, my section today will be for Test Plan 11 updates, the UNH-IOL NVMe conformance tools, NVMe-oF interop testing, and then I'll pass it back to Kerry so she can go over the PCI interop testing. So if we take a look at all the test plans that are part of Test Plan 11, there are quite a few of them. There are 5 to be exact. You've got the first one, if we go left to right, you've got the NVMe Conformance Test Suite, or sometimes called the base spec. A lot of times you'll see this referred to as the base spec in a lot of our presentations and also in our discussions. This is primarily conformance that'll be testing out SSD products as well as fabric products. So there are tests for both types of products in this one test plan. Then you have the NVMe Interop. This is the second test plan that has 9 test cases in it. And this is primarily for PCI testing of SSD products. The middle test plan is the NVMe MI conformance test plan that's been around for a number of years. It's got 53 tests in it. And again, this is more for PCI today, but there is talk about potentially going fabrics in the future. Skipping all the way over to the right-hand side, you see the NVMe over Fabrics Interop test. This is a test that's been around for a year or 2 now, and it's got 5 tests. It's got a new test in there for this particular Test Plan 11 update. And then the second from the right is the NVMe-oF conformance test plan. This is a new test plan that's just been put out for this Test Plan 11. It came out of the ICC just in the last couple of months. And this is something that we'll dig a little deeper in slides that'll be coming up. And this has 9 new tests that are dealing with conformance of the fabrics themselves. What you see on this test slide here is that you look on the left-hand side and you've got all the same test suites that we just talked about in the last one. But on the right-hand side, you see the products of which they actually test. So the top products on the right-hand side are the SSDs or their hosts. And really, it's the top 3 test cases that would be used to test out these products in order to gain acceptance onto the Integrators list. The MI test spec, the Interop 11.0 test spec, and also the base specification. And then if you look down on the bottom on the right-hand side, you'd see the NVMe-oF or fabric subsystems or hosts products there. And you'd also use the base specification to perform testing for those OF type of devices, as well as you'd use the Interop, the OF Interop 11.0 test plan, as well as the OF specification that is the new specification that's out there to perform conformance on fabric products. So this kind of shows you the different test plans that we have and which devices or device types would be testing using those specific tests and test cases in the test plans. Now let's kind of talk about the actual tests at a high level. Test Plan 11 obviously touches each one of those tests, those 5 test plans that we just mentioned in the last 2 slides. There's over 120 different changes in it. You know, there's definitely 80 updates or so on the base spec alone. A lot of them are refinements, but there are 17 new test cases. They're in the different areas that you can see listed out here for identity of namespace, unchanged features, telemetry and data units written, multiple ranges for deallocating, and also directives send and receive. One other item that I'd mentioned that people should be aware of is that there are 20 plus test case status changes in these test plans, which means a test case might have actually gone from the IP or the in progress state to go to FYI, or they could have gone from FYI, which is for your information, to a mandatory state for either PCI or fabrics. So please make sure you go to the IOL website, take a look at the test plans, especially the red-lined test plans that are out there. It's an easier way for you to see what has changed between test plan 10 and test plan 11. And you can see all of these different changes. They're highlighted in red, and it's really great, so you can see them very easily. But just be aware and be, in order to get your products onto the IL for test plan 11, this test plan 11 changes for all of these 5 test plans are the ones that you need to meet the criteria of in order to get on that integrators list. All right, so let's take a little deeper dive. So if we take a look at test plan 11 for the base specification itself, you've got the 5 areas with the 17 new tests that are listed at the top. And then down bottom, you've got the status changes that I referenced in the last slide. These particular 2 test cases, 6.1 and 9.2.3, at the bottom are basically tests that are just going from the IP to the FYI state. So really, these are tests that were in progress or in development, but now the ICC and the NVMe.org and the companies that represent it, which of course are all of you on this call, feel that these 2 tests are at a decent state and a decent point where they've had enough changes and they're actually good enough to be actually put into the FYI state. So this, again, is for the base spec and changes for it. Moving on to the actual interoperability test plan for PCI, you do have a new test and an updated test. And really what it is it's kind of the same hot plug test that is part of the existing Interop test plan. And they broke the hot plug test into 2 different distinct tests. One of them will perform I/O as part of the hot plug, and then the other one will actually not perform I/O, but it definitely has some clarification for the reinsertion criteria of the actual PCI element. So again, not a lot of changes for this particular test plan, but just be aware. And again, go on the website, check out. You can see the differences that are in this particular one. The MI test plan for doing conformance actually only has a couple of small changes. Again, nothing radical. You can see what they are here for the test cases 8.5 and 8.7, formatting mostly. But please, again, take a look at that. You can see that not a lot of changes for the MI test plan. So getting into the fabrics test plans, this is again, talking about the base spec now and talking about it with respect to fabrics. The 17 new test cases that are in these 5 different areas that we mentioned a couple of slides ago, these 17 new test cases actually are for fabrics as well as PCI testing, and that's why they showed up in both of these slides. You need to actually, they're FYI, because any new test that comes into any kind of test specification from the ICC or the NVMe.org actually start off as FYI so that the NVMe.org and also the industry at large can know how the particular test case is working before they make it actually mandatory, if it can be. So again, the top section going over the new tests is the 17 new test cases that definitely apply to fabric devices as well as PCI. And then if you take a look at the bottom of this slide, you look at the status changes. This is a lot of them. You see that there are 22 different status changes there that went from an FYI state to mandatory for fabrics. Please be aware of this. Please take a look at the test plans again to make sure you understand which ones they are, because these are the ones that are now mandatory for test plan 11, and in order to get onto the integrators list for 11, test plan 11. And then there are 2 other cases that went from IP to FYI. So those are kind of the changes for the actual base spec with respect to conformance. And then I'd like to talk about the Interop test plan, which is the one listed at the bottom of this slide, and also the new NVMe-oF conformance, which is the one at the top. If I talk about Interop first, then really there's really only one new test, and it's the Keep Alive test. And again, it's FYI because it's a new test. And then of course, there's one new transport protocol that we now support for as part of the integrators list, and that is NVMe over TCP. So in terms of Interop, there's just the one new test to go along with the 4 that are existing, and also the new actual transport that can get you onto the integrators list. So those are pretty much what there are today for that one. Now, talking about the NVMe-oF conformance, this is a brand new test plan, and it's just coming out with tests in the 11 specification of these actual tests. And really, there's three distinct areas that we test right now: the NVMe-oF commands, controller architecture, and discovery services. So the NVMe commands will pretty much go over and test out different areas such as discovery services or controllers or connection to that, connection to NVMe subsystems, or actually trying some negative testing to do and see if incompatible formats actually work. Looking at the controller architecture, they're really looking at the data structure that identifies the controllers to make sure that it adheres to the specifications and the standards of the actual 1.3 and 1.4 standards put out by NVMe.org. And then the last one is the discovery services, and this is really looking at tests. There are two tests in this particular section that go over initialization of discovery controllers and also making sure the keep alive happens. So again, brand new test plan, all FYI test in the NVMe-oF conformance, but definitely a new area that is definitely exciting and that we'll have testing for at this particular Plugfest. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the, at a high level, the different areas that have been updated in terms of Test Plan 11, and also what we'll be testing. If you've got obviously questions about it, you can obviously ask through the QA section of this presentation, or feel free to email us at any point. We can go over those. The next part I'd like to go over is the NVMe conformance tools that we use to perform this testing. If you look on the left-hand side of this slide, these are depictions or screenshots of our actual tools. The top one is the IOL's Interact PC Edition tool, and then the bottom is the IOL Interact Lecroy Edition. Each one of them tests out the base specification and will test out SSD products. Obviously, the Teledyne-Lecroy has some unique lower-level PCI test cases, and that's what they're able to do. But both of these are used today to perform conformance testing against NVMe SSD devices. MI conformance is actually a test that's used to perform testing against SSDs too. This will use the Teledyne-Lecroy T34, and it will definitely use the specification specified for MI. Moving on to the fabrics conformance, you can see again on the left-hand side, you've got the Interact PC Edition. Now, what we'll be using for testing of these products is you'll have the actual fabric tests that are within the base specification itself, as well as the new NVMe-oF conformance test plan that we mentioned in the earlier slides. And again, if you look to the right-hand side, this will actually be used to test out fabric devices and hosts. So again, that's fabrics. If we take a look at the different system requirements, these are the system requirements for all of the IOL Interact PC Edition products. We have 4 different ones: the PCI, the Rocky, Fiber Channel, and TCP. And you can see the OSs and kernel versions associated with each on this particular slide. The Teledyne-Lecroy has different system requirements, and you can see them here on this one. You've got Windows 10 or later, and also that we actually use the protocol analyzer 10.10 and the build 7230. And then you can see the T34 and today what version of firmware we use to perform the testing and will use at the Plugfest itself. So again, this is for the Teledyne-Lecroy system. And then to look at it in a different form, you've got the same T34 exerciser, and we would connect to it with a Windows initiator that we'd run the PET Tracer software 1010 to actually test out those MI devices. So that kind of goes over the different areas. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't actually mention that there is a way that if you're using any of these tools and you find any kind of an issue or you'd like to request a feature of these products, then what you can do today is obviously submit that request to us. And just like to let you know that what we're using today is a agile type process to do development here at the IOL, because as you all well know, the IOL has a dual purpose or mission statement. The first one is to be a great third-party independent test facility, but the second one is to educate the next generation of engineers. And as such, we're trying to use the latest and greatest technology as well as development tools and to educate our students in that. So we're using agile processes that you all use today in your shops, as well as the tools such as Jira and Bitbucket in order to get that work done. We do provide release notes with every release that goes out, and those are all up on Box along with the actual software itself that you download. And of course, if you have any issues with that, Kerry's a great resource to get in touch with because she can give you access to those. Now, We typically release major releases in lockstep with the actual Plugfest and test plans that come out, such as this time around. Right now, we're working on test plan 11. The software we're releasing is 11. The actual Plugfest itself is 11. So these are major releases, the 11 release of the software, the test plan, and of course the Plugfest that we'll be doing here shortly in a couple of weeks. We do also have minor releases that come out in between, and we usually do about 2 Plugfests a year, by the way. But in between those 2 Plugfests, so the 6 months in between each one of them, we typically release minor releases on a monthly basis. And any issues or features that are requested by you, the customer, would actually be put into those minor releases if it doesn't come out in the major release itself. You know, we try to avoid engineering releases just because it can deflect, but there are times when either we don't have product in-house that can actually test out the product, or maybe it's one that's very unique to your product that we need to provide additional debugging for. And in those cases, we would provide engineering releases, but we try to avoid it because we are releasing right now on a monthly basis, really. And of course, if you do have an issue, the best way for you to report it is to go into the actual IOL website and go in through the portal that is given to you as a member of the IOL and the NVMe group within the IOL. And once you log into your actual My IOL, we call it, the portal itself, you can see on the right-hand side, you can make reservations, you can register equipment to be tested, you can check your memberships or testing summaries and things like this. But obviously what we're here to talk about right now is that you want to report an issue. So over on the left-hand side, you'd pick the actual product, which of course in this case is the NVMe PC Edition. And in the 2 boxes below, you'd provide as much information as obviously you can in order for us to reproduce it, as well as any logs that come along with the testing itself, because obviously we're going to try to reproduce it and fix your issue or create that new feature. And as much information to reproduce it as possible is always essential. Okay. So that kind of went over the conformance and the test plans itself, and now I'd like to touch upon interop testing. And this interop testing is going to be for fabrics, it's going to be for Rocky, fiber channel, and TCP. These are pretty much slides of how we have it depicted and how we will have it, the topology of the interop testing that will happen during the Plugfest. Also how we have it obviously in our test beds here in the lab. I'll kind of go over some of the equipment that we use today. We would use our equipment here in the lab during the Plugfest if needed, but typically we would obviously like to use your equipment that you bring to the Plugfest in order to have it, you know, tested for the IL list, but also tested against other products as much as possible, as I'm sure you'd like to see that also. So the first one is just a generic slide that kind of shows how it's set up for the actual interop testing. You've got on the left-hand side, you've got a server itself or a host or an initiator. And it goes through a dual switch fabric and then ultimately ends up at an NVMe-oF target. Sorry about that. Really, this is the basic test setup that is going to be for all 3 of the different fabrics protocols, Rocky, fiber channel, and TCP. On the right-hand side, these are the tests that are actually in the Interop test plan. And as I said in one of the earlier slides, you've got the 4 first tests, the discover, the send, the link pull, and the power up. Those have already been there for the last 2 Plugfests that we've had, or 3 Plugfests. And then the new test case that we have right now, which is the keep alive timeout. And again, new tests are always FYI. So as Kerry had mentioned in one of her slides early on, obviously there are actually criteria for you to actually meet in order to get on the integrators list. If you are a target, then you must pass conformance testing as well as interop testing with at least 2 initiators. But if you are a host or an initiator and or a switch product, then really you just need to pass the interop testing with 2 unique targets. So again, just to reiterate that's kind of the means in which you can get onto the integrators list itself. Moving on to our Rocky setup, really the same setup as the slide I just showed you a second ago, but what this has for additional information is the actual products that we use in our testing today. And this is what we have in our test bed here at the lab. We have others also, but right now this is what we're using, the Mellanox products on the actual initiator and the target, and of course edge core switches in the middle. If you look at the TCP setup, again, we're using the edge cores, the switching products in the middle, but you've got Intel NICs on the ends. Now, one unique thing that we did when we first set it up, couple of our students set it up to actually go through our corporate network and the switches that were there. It actually worked, which was very cool, but we actually didn't want that to happen, so we switched it over to our actual test bed. But it was kind of unique to see that it would work pretty much through a switching environment that had no additional configurations. And then, of course, the last one is fiber channel, and you can see that we use the HBAs on the actual initiator and target product, as well as the brocade switches, one being a true brocade, the other being an HB rebranded brocade switch. So this gives you an idea of the actual interoperability setups that we have. And I guess I'd like to talk a little bit now about the large build that we'd like to do. Typically how it's worked in the last few Plugfests that we've had in the last couple of years is it takes about half of the week in order to get all participants through the NVMe testing that would occur in order to get onto the integrators list. That left us a day or two at the end of the week to perform something that we're calling a large build. And this large build testing is something where we'd like to get everybody and everybody's product into a large build that would include all products and actually perform some testing upon it. Now, the testing could be as easy as, have I/O traffic running on each initiator, going to each targets, and making sure that it runs overnight. Because as we all know, we're here for a short period of time, just a week for the Plugfest, and we want to make sure we can get as much testing as possible done during this week. This large build would give us a good chance for your product to interoperate with all the other products that are actually here at the Plugfest that week. And there are some unique tests that we've performed the last two, or at least the last Plugfest that we had, where for the Rocky fabrics testing, we actually did DCB testing. And that's something that we'd be looking to do, as I think Kerry mentioned earlier in one of her slides too, if there is any other testing that we'd like to do for either fiber channel, Rocky, or TCP. What we're going to be doing is setting up some calls that'll start next week on Thursday at 2 p.m. And if you're already registered for the Plugfest, I'm going to be sending you an email inviting you to participate in these calls if you'd like to work on the large build. Typically, the way this is going to happen is we're usually done with testing all of the NVMe products for the integrators list by, Wednesday-ish. And at that point, we start creating the large build or testing out various things such as DCB that I talked about a little earlier. So again, we'll have the call starting next Thursday. If you're registered, which again at the bottom of the slide there, you can see the link to actually register for the event. Love to have you all involved. I mean, this is a cool way to everybody show their various products, as everybody from the initiator, the switching products, and the targets, and to actually test out some of the different technologies that you're going to see out in your installations and make sure that they work correctly before, of course, everybody gets out there. So I'll be sending out the mails to everybody who's registered, but if for some reason there's some snafu there, please contact us directly and we can definitely get you in there. All right. So at this point, I've gone over the top 3, the Test Plan 11 updates. I've gone over the NVMe Conformance tools and the Interop testing for each of them. I'd like to throw the control back to Kerry at this point, and she'll be talking about PCI Interop testing. Kerry?
Excellent. Thanks, Tim. I mentioned earlier the requirements for the NVMe PCIe Interop testing, having to test against 5 different hosts for the I/O tests. But let's just take a look at the different platforms that we have at the IOL. There may be other companies attending that will add some of their hosts to this list as well. We will also be doing boot testing along with the I/O tests and hot plug testing. Future works. So what happens after this? Right now, work is already being done to set up for Plugfest number 12, which is scheduled to take place November 2019. And as soon as Plugfest 11 is over, work for Plugfest 13, which will be next spring, is already going to get underway. But you can get involved as well. We are happy to hear from you, get as much input as possible. The way to do that is actually by attending the ICC calls. The information is listed right here. They take place Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. If you have any questions on how to get the call information, either contact the NVMe org or contact me and I will help you out with that. Logistics. Be prepared. The most important thing you could do is download the test tools, run them in your own facility, do the pre-tests. Make sure that when you do come to the Plugfest, you feel confident that your product will pass all the testing. The links to obtain the software are listed right here. If you do not already have the software, we do require a licensing agreement, and again, the link is listed right here. Be prepared. We request that people bring 2 samples of each of their products at a minimum. 2 samples are required to do the interoperability test, but if you do bring additional testing, then if one of your devices happens to break or malfunction, you have a spare. And at the end of the week, once people start wrapping up, if you wanted to do any additional testing or retests, you'll have extra devices to do that. Also, if your product requires any special connectors or cabling, be sure to bring that. For fabrics, we do ask that you bring a hose system for products. Any cabling, as I mentioned before, for your products. We do have cabling and tools and equipment on site. However, can't be guaranteed that we will have everything that you'll need. So it's just better to be safe. Like I mentioned, we do have some stuff. We do have mice, keyboards. We have conference rooms here that you can reserve. The wireless internet will be provided to you on the first day in the back of your badge. If you're unsure if you should pack something, you can always just contact me and I'll let you know if we do have that available and I can set it aside for you. We ask that there are no photos taken at this event. If you do want to take a photo of your team at the Plugfest, just let one of the UNH staff know, and that won't be a problem. There may be UNH staff going around taking generic photos for our websites and our webinars, but if you see somebody taking photos and you're unsure, let us know, and we will address it. Here we've listed out the travel information. If you need a visa invitation letter, contact me and I will help you out with that. The shipping address is listed right here, along with our phone number. Please be sure that all equipment for the Fabrics Plugfest, so the Plugfest occurring the week of June 17th, is delivered by June 14th, so the Friday before the event. All of your boxes and equipment will be left for you on your workstation. So as soon as you arrive at the IOL and get to your designated areas, everything will be waiting for you. Here's a little map of the parking area. We don't have our own parking lot. It's about a 5 or 10 minute walk. So the directions from the parking lot to the IOL are here on this yellow squiggly line. The Plugfests typically run Monday through Thursday. Tim will be having calls coming up related to the Fabrics event. There's a chance that the Fabrics event may go into Friday. That will be communicated if that's the case. Doors will open at 8 a.m. Monday through Thursday or Friday. and we will probably test until 6 p.m. The schedule will be made available 2 weeks before the Plugfest. Some days may go till 5, other days may go till 6. We will have lunch, coffee, snacks provided each day. Come hungry because we have lots and lots of food. It's really good. And the registration, we've included the links here again, one for the Fabrics event, the other for the PCIe event. Again, at registration, 2 products per company. If you have additional products that you are interested in bringing to this event, let us know and we will put them on a waiting list. If there's enough room, we will add it to the schedule. Also, 4 engineers per company. If you do have additional attendees that you would like to attend, let us know. There's a small fee for it, but we will work with you. So here's the contact information for Tim and I. And here you see a picture of one of our past events. We do have a lot of fun on Wednesday nights. We typically do a social event. We've done boat events in the past. We've gone to the upstairs of our local football stadium. So we will have some fun events for you once you come. And with that, I am going to turn it over to the rest of the team for questions.
Okay, this is Tim again. And I guess there's been a bunch of questions added to the Q&A section. If you have any others, please feel free to. I'll just kind of run through them, the ones that have already been asked and also answered. Dave Wolf is online also, and he's been graciously answering a lot of them for us as we speak. So Mickey asks, what exact initiator kernel version will be used for the NVMe-oF TCP target testing? And Dave answered, our test tool, which will perform the NVMe base specification conformance tests over NVMe TCP, uses the kernel version 4.19.0-RC6. And again, this will all be online. You'll be able to see this. So we're planning to use that same kernel for the testing. Okay, the next question was from Carl. And he's wanting to know if there's going to be any iWarp testing at the Fabrics Plugfest. And we'd love to see that. Dave answered the same way. Be happy to do iWarp as a proof of concept, and it would be a proof of concept because obviously the ICC would be very interested to see one of the, protocols or transmit protocols that haven't been tested yet in a Plugfest tested. And then they'd be able to see how well that particular protocol does. And then from there, they could add it to the integrators list for probably the next Plugfest if everything goes well. So it would be great, iWarp or InfiniBand are the other ones that always seem to come up. But obviously we'd need enough products to have enough to perform the testing. At least in terms of, we'd need at least 2 unique targets to do that. And we'd probably be able to come up with a couple of actual initiators would be good too, as well as switching products. So yes, any kind of new protocols that are actually supported by the NVMe specification, such as iWarp or InfiniBand, would be great. And let's see. Marta was asking if we'll be using the actual kernel version 4.19 RC6. Again, Dave responded yes to that, so that will be happening. And then Mickey was asking questions about the NVMe TCP support and that it's integrated into the kernel.org starting at 5.x. And can we provide the exact reference for the location to get that initiator kernel? And at this point, we're going to have to get back to you, Mickey, on that one because we're going to have to dig a little bit more, and it's probably more than we want to get into right this second, but we'll definitely get back and add that to the presentation when it's posted online. Okay, Matt was asking about speeds in terms of the Fabrics Plugfest, and for Rocky and TCP, will we be going up to 100 gig, and will there also be need for 25 or 10, from switch perspectives? And I would say yes at that point. Yes, for all the above. What we saw at the last event was we had 100 gig links, but we also had 40 gig links as well as 25. I can't remember a 10 gig link, but I think there was one there. But as we plug in different products to do like the large build or something like that, it would be great if the actual switch products and everything could negotiate to the speeds that were supported. And then there is one final question, and if you have others, please feel free to add them in or ask at any point. They were asking if carry-on equipment, to come to the lab too, because Kerry had mentioned, sending it to us before, at least by the Thursday before the Plugfest event would be optimal. It gives us time to move it into locations and things like that. But yes, if you're carrying equipment, fine. Just let us know what you'll be bringing, just so we can have an idea. And if it's something that you need a lot of space for, we can adjust for that. But if it's just a regular hand carry or something like that, that's fine too. So that completes what I see right now for questions and answers. If there are any others, I'd say please, let us know. But if that is all, then I would say that would conclude our webinar for today. But of course, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. We can answer them pretty readily for you. We've done this a number of times and can't wait to see you guys again. Looks to be a good week. June is always a good time. The boat ride last year was awesome, and I'd like to do that again, but I understand it's a vote thing. But anyways, thank you for coming, and we look forward to seeing. Oh, hold on, I think I just saw one more question. Let me just check. Yes, he's saying he thought that the Interact PC tool was running on 4.10. And again, it depends on which version of the actual Interact tool that you use. There was one slide that I had that actually listed out the different kernels for each of them. But yes, there are different ones for each of the different products. So with that said, that was the last question. So thank you very much for joining, everyone. Look forward to seeing you, having some good testing, and we'll see you shortly. Bye-bye now.